When kids have a little bit of a say in what the consequence is, and I know that's a bad word, but I have to explain to kids, there are positive and negative consequences. The positive consequence, these are the things that you're able to do.
So it's not taking away, it's adding.
Right. I kind of remind families and children what are rights and what are privileges.
Yes, that's the best.
Right?
Rights are food, shelter, love,
Yeah.
water, a safe space.
And using the term choice as they get older, because it's a choice. Like, so if you choose not to do your homework, then you're choosing that you can't play whatever the game is tonight, or you can't watch this show. That's your choice. That's fine. The consequence should be the consequence, not your reaction. Not, well, I'm mad, not you screaming at the child. It's not about you, and it's not going to internally motivate the kid, and it's not going to teach them, oh, like this is on me. And eventually, most of the kids I've seen, when the parents start doing that, it takes them a little bit, but they finally do it.
Welcome to Successful with ADHD. I'm Brooke Schnittman. Let's get started.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Successful with ADHD. Today, I have David Krasky in the house. David and I have collaborated as colleagues multiple times. He is an amazing person, and he's a licensed school psychologist and a new author. He has volunteered his time in our ADHD EdCamp year after year, where we support individuals with ADHD in a free setting with 30 ADHD specialists. So he is so giving of himself, and now he has put years of information into his new book, Parenting for the Future, which helps people with ADHD and executive function issues, as well as neurotypical children as well, and the parents. And we're going to get into that in a little bit, but just a little bit more about David. He is a licensed school psychologist working in private practice with over 20 years of experience working with children, teens, young adults, and their parents. He focuses on assessment and treatment of behavioral, learning, emotional, and social difficulties. He places a strong emphasis on empowering children so they can be growing up to be a thriving, well-adjusted adult. Don't we all want that? David, so great to have you. Thank you for being here. Yeah, and when I was reading your book, I mean, I can relate on a professional level, but I can really relate also on a parenting level as well, because when you're in the thick of it, right? Yeah. You want to sometimes rip your hair out and go back to, whoa, I know this, but like, why is this not working in the moment? Why can't I think properly? Or why are my executive functions working? Oh, I'm emotionally dysregulated right now.
Same here.
So, right. So one thing that really stood out to me in your book was Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I don't think we talk about it enough, right? Mm-hmm. The power of small steps and really noticing where you are in your hierarchy of needs. I do talk about hierarchy of needs for adults in my book, Activate Your ADHD Potential. And you bring it up in your book as well for parents working with their child. So can you tell me a little bit more about that and how you help it in your work with children?
Sure. So I kind of think of it as structure is important, and having some kind of framework to structure what you're doing. You know, our whole lives are very structured, whether it's work, when we're children, we go to school, a lot of our life is structured. But when it comes to parenting, when it comes to these kind of bigger abstract ideas, it's all lumped together. So it's hard to prioritize. It's hard to know, well, what's most important and what's the goal here. So I kind of use it. It's funny, I draw it on my big dry erase board in the office a lot of times with the teens and young adults and parents to kind of show like, well, if we don't take care of these things here, we can't look beyond that. There is no success in these areas. You can't skip these steps.
Totally. And when you say these steps, we're talking about like physiological needs from the beginning, right?
I usually start, and my wife is a special educator. We have similar backgrounds, and we always, anyone we're working with, we always kind of focus on the basics of, are you sleeping well? Do you eat well? Do you get some exercise? Are you healthy? Mm-hmm. Like we really start with those basics. And when I say exercise, do you move? We were talking before about being like Gen X. In my mind, Because kids will say, like, I walk around school. I'm like, do you ever break a sweat? Do you, does your parent kick you out of the house and you come back in, you're like covered and you have to get a drink? Like, yeah, then you ran around. It doesn't have to be a gym. Sleeping well has been a very big one the last 20 years, really, since like the invention of smartphones and technology. They've noticed probably 40% to 50% of kids middle and high school age are not getting the right amount or healthy sleep. And then
Wow.
diet, you go out of the country anywhere else and then you come back in, you're like, wow, our food's different. Like it's
Or I
weird.
lost weight in this other country, but I ate so much more.
Right. Or I'm at a party and I see like a 4-year-old with like Takis and a Coke. I'm like,
Oh, that's
oh
my
man.
stepson's. Yeah.
So I always
Yep.
kind of talk about, that framework of, well, if there's issues with attention and dysregulatory behaviors, we want to put all the things in place that promote the opposite of that promote
Yep.
very good attention and executive skills. So let's rule out, let's just make sure you're really healthy, you're taking care of your body, you're sleeping well, your social connectivity needs are being met, your emotional needs are being met. Now we can address these other things.
Yeah. No, it's so true. So Dr. Hallowell talks about the importance of vitamin C, especially for people with ADHD. And then going back to the movement piece, I saw somewhere today actually that 7% of people get the movement in that they need a day. And then I don't remember what the year was, but like before it was over 80% who, isn't that wild?
My line I use with a lot of the kids when I start pushing them on, I know we're working together, we're a team, and they kind of think like Dave's on my side, he's going to tell my parents. I'm like, you need to move. Like our bodies are made to move. Like you have these legs and these lungs and these arms, and thank goodness, like you're healthy and you're able. And one of the things I kind of mentioned in the book, there are some times when I believe it's pretty black and white, that there are lines in the sand. And that to me is one of them, when the kids are like, well, I don't like it. I don't like to sweat. I'm like, I know, but this is a health issue. This is good for your body and it's good for your brain and your mind, your emotional state. Like I will fight this battle here.
Yeah. And it's so interesting because like, I always think like treat yourself like a baby, right? Something switches when we start becoming children and then adults. Having a 3-year-old daughter, she will always express her needs, right? She wants to go outside. She wants to move. She tells me when she's hungry. She tells me when she's thirsty. She tells me when she needs to sleep. I mean, she doesn't directly tell me, but she'll cry, right?
Yeah.
And we attend to that, but I don't understand what switches in us, like when that distinction is where all of a sudden it's like, nope, no longer going to attend to my needs. All these other things are important.
And I get a lot of what's kind of helped me write this over the years is, I'm fortunate enough. I built good relationships with the kids and teens and young adults I work with. And I hear the stressors and the pressures that they're under that almost get in the way of taking care of those basic needs. And what's interesting is I'll see some people for years, like I'll have clients that they'll kind of grow up with me and they start to recognize it again when they're on their own. So a lot of these kids, and you're probably getting them, once they get middle high school, it's a lot of pressure for the academics and the overscheduling and like the more advanced classes. And then they're neglecting those needs. And then we kind of, I like to take that big, step back view. Like, let's step back and look at this whole thing, right? Like you were doing really well. Things were good here. And then you started getting more stressed and then you started isolating more, being alone more, not going out as much, not doing these activities. Your grades were good, but then you started having a lot more difficulties in these areas. And they'll go away. And I see a few right now they're here for spring break. And they start to realize like, yeah, I really noticed that I need to be around people more. I'm like, oh yeah, how do you know? Like, well, I was alone a lot and I would just study by myself in my dorm room, or I'd always say no to go into this thing because I'd get worried about whatever. But I noticed when I would do those things, I'd feel better. I'd be in a better mood like for the next few days. And I didn't recognize it when I was younger. So it's a good point
Interesting.
that the 3-year-old is able to, I'm tired. Like, all right, or they cry, like you said. So when they're 23, instead of crying, it might be, I have no motivation. So I use the term a lot, and I write about it like, these are the red flags. These are the warning signs. It might not be a tantrum, but it's you avoiding this work. It's you not leaving your dorm room for 4 straight days. It's you, what the term I learned this year, doom scrolling.
Mm-hmm.
You got that one?
Yeah, and the doom scrolling happens very often when you have that low dopamine and you're seeking it in a way which ends up draining your battery in an unhealthy.
Right. This almost diminishes. And in fact, I think there's even studies showing, because they finally have now like a good amount of data with like social media and all the other things. And they're starting to see like this was kind of worse than we thought it was going to be.
Mm-hmm.
Especially when it comes to like, I know girls and bullying and self-esteem and
Mm-hmm.
self-image issues
Mm-hmm.
with social media. I don't know what it's going to look like in 10, 20 years, but I know unchecked, it's not great.
Yeah, I've done a lot of talk about that on previous episodes of the podcast as far as social media and how there was like some article that went out there years ago that Facebook causes depression for students. And then when you dig deeper into the article or the study, you notice that is a very black and white statement, right? Like the people who are getting depressed by going onto Facebook or other social media platforms, well, a lot of what drove them onto those platforms was because they already had depression. They already had anxiety. So it wasn't the Facebook or the social media that was causing it. So it was just a part of the whole picture. So social media is so funny like that, right? We just need to learn how to manage it and have the right tools.
I get a lot of questions from parents about that, right? When's a good age to let my kid have this, that, whatever else? And unfortunately, like in this field, like any other field, it's not so black and white. Like it depends on the child. It depends on their development. It depends on what they have going on in their life. I know some kids that never use their cell phone. They're never on it. They don't play games on it. No social media. They don't even text her. They couldn't care less. And I know others that if you even try to take it from them while we're talking, they'll get a little aggressive, and younger kids. So like you said, like it's the whole, like we learned in school, correlation, causation, like it doesn't mean this causes this. So I try to figure out with the parents, like what the purpose of whatever it is serving, what are the consequences. So I always kind of say it's easier to replace their behavior than to stop it. So if you want your kid watching less TikTok, if you introduce other things in their life, right, they'll naturally be on it. So if you let your kid, and I've done a lot of like following Jonathan Haidt in the last year since The Anxious Generation came out. Oh my gosh, it's good. It's a good book. He's been all over like national media.
I gotta go research him.
So he's a social psychologist. He's been around for years, but he really pushes the idea of the increase in helicopter parenting, along with the increase in social media and the decrease of monitoring children online has caused a lot of problems overall. And there are some, like you said, that it's not causing that much of an issue, but his whole idea is to kind of reverse it, where there should be more monitoring of kids' online use and technology use and time, and letting kids go out and be independent and responsible and learn and fail and try things on their own.
Yeah, I love the whole failing and trying and not giving everyone a trophy like you and I grew up receiving. Everyone gets a trophy. I know you talk about that in your book. I wanted to mention something that you've said multiple times, the power of connection and socialization. So you have a child, especially in the ADHD realm or neurodivergent realm, who has difficulty socializing. So they find socialization through Fortnite or through other forms of video games or technology. What do you do with that?
So again, if you're thinking, and I write about this and I talk to the parents about this, about like, well, what's the goal, right? Is your goal for your child to improve their social skills? Then yes, if they're playing online with friends, that is definitely one way in which they can get practice at doing that. And they need the practice. And if it's an environment where they feel more comfortable, safe, great. That's much better than playing alone without talking to the friends, because at least now that part of their brain that has to interpret voice tone and sarcasm and pauses and knowing when to speak and when not to, that's great. Like that's helpful and wonderful. So it's almost like levels. Like if you want them to practice, that's good. Better to maybe play with some people in person. So it might be, oh, if your friends want to play with you and you're all playing Minecraft on your computers together, great. And you're all like showing, it's almost like parallel play where they're going
That's
to
exactly what I was
naturally,
thinking.
right? Like they're going to organically just, oh my God, look at this. Like, no, don't go there. I've seen it like
Yes.
with kids.
Yes. And even
Versus
adults too.
even adults. Versus, and it's funny, I work with a lot of children like that, high schoolers in particular. Their worst nightmare is when I say, what if I tell mom and dad to drop you off at that party with like 50 kids that you don't know and they're not coming back for 6 hours? They look at me like I have just taken their favorite pet. That is so stress inducing.
Talk about panic.
Right?
Yeah.
Right. So I'm like, not really going to do that. Like, don't worry. But the whole idea is like, and it doesn't have to be that of the goal. Where if the kid says, I just want to be able to have a few friends or to be able to go into work and to talk to two people. Well, yeah, let's work up to that goal. Versus if I have a child with ADHD or social skills deficits or neurodivergence, if they say, well, I want to join the fraternity and I want to date and I want to do these other things, then I take a very practice-based approach where, okay, we're not going to just flood you and throw you in that environment, but let's start small. So it might just start with, I have a few right now I'm working with that are looking for work. So just starting with, ask to talk to the manager. Don't just apply online. It's going to be stressful, but it'll just be about 30 to 45 seconds, little discomfort. But by the third or fourth manager you talk to, it won't be as bad. So I really believe in the exposure, the practice, because at the end of the day, the world is a social environment. And at some level, there has to be some knowledge, ability to get whatever their needs are met.
Yeah. You're talking to someone who has major social anxiety. You probably wouldn't be able to tell through a screen or through what we do, because I thought I was always an extrovert, but I've introverted a lot in my older years. Yeah. When you said drop me off at a party for 6 hours with 50 people I don't know, I immediately thought, okay, am I going to be driving? Like, can you not drop me off? Can I have my own car so I can leave as soon? Like, can I have that escape plan?
Yeah.
But the parallel play, talk about that. Like, you've explained what it is already, but does that have, in your research, have the same effects socially on the brain that direct interaction does?
So it's definitely shown, especially for people that are more introverted. It is nourishing, even being around people, because what happens is the brain interprets it as, oh, like I'm out, I'm in the community, I feel one with the community or part of the community, instead of being isolated and something being wrong with me. And I didn't have the pressure of having to talk to everyone, introduce myself, be judged on my performance, appearance, anything else. So I love the idea of even thinking like introversion, extroversion, of being, a spectrum and getting what you need, where I think the term they use is like introverts to refill their battery, they need time alone. Extroverts to refill their battery, they need time with others. And nobody's 100% one or the other. So I've met many people who are very happy going to maybe a small gathering when they're not doing as much talking and they're just sitting listening to people and they're thrilled. They thought it was a great night.
They're recharged.
Right? Isn't that? And
Yeah.
I never understood that. I'm like, yeah, but you didn't say anything. Like, oh no, but I was listening and I know you were talking to me because people were making eye contact with me and it was great.
What about not saying anything and just listening to or watching a TV show with another human right next to you?
It's again, it's that shared experience,
Yeah.
right? Like they talk about more on like in the world of autism and neurodivergence fears, they talk about reciprocity and kind of reading cues and being comfortable in that environment. That alone is definitely going to be helpful for the person. And what's going to
Mhm.
happen a lot of times is over time, it'll be very natural. They'll start to engage a little bit, or there'll be a little more of that reciprocal. It might even be a glance or a look, or like where you kind of share this thing that happened where you're watching the TV show and you both found something funny and you both be like, haha, and like look at each other and point and laugh. That's a connection point. That's important. And that alone, it seems small, but for people that don't get a lot of it or enough of it, it's very important. It's
Yeah.
it's baked into our DNA. We've been doing that for over 100,000 years.
Sure. Sure. So you mention in your book in the chapter of thinking differently about behavior
Mhm.
problems. You discuss shifting perspectives on problematic behavior. So what are some key behavior management strategies that you think work well for children with ADHD?
So for the younger ones, I've definitely found, for parents, unfortunately, a lot of parents, it's going to be more difficult when you have a child with ADHD because what happens is, like you're expecting a certain level of regulation. And then when it doesn't happen, you get annoyed, upset,
Hmm.
frustrated, all of it. So part of it is knowing your child, knowing where they're at, knowing what's hard, knowing that, okay, like if we go into this quiet library, they might just run and yell going to the section they want, and I might feel embarrassed.
Hmm.
So a lot of the work is really working at first with the parents and saying, okay, listen, you're going to be a little uncomfortable here. That's okay.
Hmm.
Don't avoid it. We can also do a lot of preventative work. We can prep, or we
Hmm.
can prep you, like get ready. You're going to take him into the library and he's going to start yelling. No, 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 I won't start yelling. It's fine. You will. It's okay. You've done it every time this week. Because they'll usually tell you right in the moment, no, 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 I won't. I'm like, it's fine. Like you're not in trouble. You get excited and this is what happens. You're 6 or whatever age you are. This is what mom or dad is going to do. So it might be something as simple as, okay, we're prepping them, right? They do
Hmm.
this in school. You do this. All right, kids, we're
Hmm.
about to line up and walk through the hallway. Remember,
Yep.
we have to be, and they make the little kids, your daughter probably does it where they put a hand over their lips and they
Right.
put their hands up.
Right.
You could do the same thing for anything. Like, all right, like we're about to do this thing. Like, all right, remember, these are the rules. This is what we're going to do. If you get excited, you know, it's okay if you want to do this, but, we don't want to disrupt anyone. So that's the preventative piece. The reactionary piece is more, we focus so much on punishment. I
Hmm.
just find overall as a culture, it's all about punishment. But unfortunately, there's 50 years of research that they've done. Punishment works short term. It does not work long term.
Yep.
Period. For anything. Breaking
Dr. Gabor
laws,
Mate talks about that too.
right?
Yeah.
Like it
Yep.
doesn't teach. So if the goal is to teach, we
You
put
need that
on that hat.
intrinsic.
Right. I want to teach my child how to walk into this store and not have a meltdown if I don't buy them something. So that's what we're going to practice. And I'm going to teach them. And there's lots of different ways we could do it. I could prep them. We can maybe refocus if they're able to do that. I can then, as they get older, ask them, be like, listen, you might get upset if we go into Target and you want this pack of Pokemon cards. And I say, I told you I wasn't going to get you anything. but we can maybe do something else you want. We could go home and watch this thing. We can plan for when we come back next time what you can get.
Mm.
So it's again teaching them, okay, well, delaying gratification, dealing with
Which is
no,
hard for
which is hard.
children with impulse
Right.
control.
What can we
I
do right
mean,
now? We're upset. And also being okay, but they're going to cry. That's okay. I have to remind a lot of people, and it's funny, even the young adults will apologize for crying. And I'm like, you never apologize for, like, you cry. Crying's fine. They're going to get upset. They're going to yell. Yeah, they're 6. Sure.
yeah, it's the release of their emotions, and then they feel
Right.
better after they cry.
So that's where the kind of shift is, when instead of, with the older kids, it's I'm taking your phone.
Mm-hmm.
That's been, I can't even tell you. And then my joke is always like, oh, so like, what does the phone have to do with them like giving you an attitude just now? Like, did the phone, like, are they mimicking what
Give
they
the
say?
attitude.
Right. So then we talk about, when it comes to behavior again, and I write about this a lot, very natural related consequences, where the goal is to
Okay.
teach. So if we ran into the library yelling and ran to the section, let's practice that again the right way. Like, let's try that again.
Mm.
And then you'll get what you want, because I know you're really excited to like see the new book or whatever. But I'm gonna make you do it the right way first, and then you get to see the thing and do the thing you want.
Mm.
Not we're leaving. It's not no more video games tonight. Like, no. I want you to be able to do this. Just do it the right way.
Yeah. What if, like, let's talk about the tweens, right? The teens, the tweens, right? So it's a little bit more difficult
I've
then,
got one of those
right?
right now
Yeah, me
in the other
too.
room.
And, there's some learned behaviors, of
Mm-hmm.
course. And then you got hormones,
Oh,
and
yeah.
some of that stuff might not work as well as when you're talking about a younger child. So taking away the phone, right? That does have a short-term impact for many teens. But what are some other strategies that you can use? So let's say your child, and I hate homework, but it's the first example that came up because there's no proof that homework actually has any educational impact on the child. But you didn't do your homework. So what's the consequence? What do we do with that?
So that's where I love the idea of the kids being involved. Once they get that old, they've kind of shown, and they do this in the schools a lot, when kids have a little bit of a say and what the consequence is. And I know that's a bad word, but I have to explain to kids, like, there are positive and negative consequences. Like, the positive consequence of you doing what you need to be doing, these are the things that you're able to do. Where the negative consequences of not, right? Like,
So it's not
so
taking away, it's adding.
right. And that's where I kind of remind families and children what are rights and what are privileges.
Yes, that's the best.
Right.
Rights are food, shelter, love,
Yeah.
water, a safe space.
So it's not like, okay, so and using the term choice as they get older, because it's a choice. Like, so if you choose not to do your homework, then you're choosing that you can't, you can't play whatever the game is tonight, or you can't see your friend, or you can't watch this show. That's your choice. That's fine. The consequence should be the consequence, not your reaction, not, well, I'm mad, not you screaming at the child, because it's
not about you.
It's not about you, and it's not going to internally motivate the kid, and it's not going to teach them, oh, like, this is on me. And eventually, most of the kids I've seen, when the parents start doing that, it takes them a little bit, but they finally do it. And when they do, it's like, oh, great, you did your work. Now you get to play. You don't have as much time as before because you decided to wait and it took you a little bit, but that's fine. Like, because I told you, if you get to do this thing, now here's what happens. And being consistent with that teaches the child. Like, and that's, the whole idea. That's why I kind of titled the book Raising Future Adults, because I always find the term adult more developmental term than a chronological term.
Yeah.
Where I know law-wise, you're an adult at 18. But in my mind, I always thought like adult is someone that's able to be responsible for themselves, for their actions, to be able to use all these executive skills well enough to increase their chances of success, right? Problem solving, all that other stuff. I know 15-year-olds that can live on their own, and I know 40-year-olds that still live at home. So I think of, I'm always thinking the long term, like, well, what's the goal? This kid eventually is going to have to do homework in college. So you can't continue to do their homework or remind them every 5 minutes. Remember, this is due tomorrow. Remember, this is due tomorrow, and get stuck in that trap because
You're
when are you
acting
going
as
to
their
stop?
executive function. Right.
Right.
They're not developing. Yeah.
So again, it's very much in that frame of they're going to have to learn this skill. Can you learn to do your homework when you're not in the mood? Do you know what to do if you get stuck on a problem and now you're frustrated and dysregulated and annoyed and ready to rip it up? Now what do you do?
Yeah. I have an interesting question.
Mm.
So both of us have come from the school system. I was a special education teacher and administrator, and then I, started the coaching business. And the worst consequence for a child with ADHD was taking away PE or movement, right? They don't do their homework. Sorry, no PE. You can do it during that.
Yeah.
It's actually happening with my stepson right now.
Oh.
And they're not using it as a consequence, they're using it as an opportunity. But what are your thoughts about, as a parent, right? You don't do your homework. Now this child has activities after school. They have teams that they've committed to. Do you take away, or do you not provide that opportunity for them to participate in a team that they've already committed to? Right. Like, and I've heard this from so many parents, like, how do you choose? How do you help them choose?
I know it's like personal opinions. I think there's a few things that kind of play in. I think if it's just homework that's not going to affect your grade that much and whatever else, like, all right, well, we did make a commitment to this. And again, it's the framing from the parent, right? It's like saying to the kid, there will be a consequence for you choosing not to do your work, but it's not this. It's not missing basketball, because I believe that's part of your health and you need that. So I want you to go play basketball. But when you get home, you're not going to have your hour to just look through whatever, do whatever. Like, you're going to have your work. And if you choose not to do your work and you get a 0 tomorrow, then this is a consequence. Then those things that you want to do, and when you ask me, oh, can you take me here to get this? Or I'm going to jump online with so-and-so because he's now free. You won't get to do that. So I kind of look at, what is it that you've already made the commitment to? And if you believe it's important enough, like, this is a health issue, like, my child needs this sport or this thing, it actually makes them perform better academically, socially, behaviorally. They need it.
Yeah.
Versus, he goes to some club after school that maybe it's a little disorganized and they just sit around and talk, and he didn't really make a commitment. Like, well, no, I'm not taking you to that club until your work is done. I might not believe that's as important as the homework. So you're kind of weighing the two. And then teaching them also, like, again, that delayed gratification. Like, when you get your work done, then you get to do the thing. But again, I think of as an adult, like, if you need to work out every day as part of your self-care and mental, yeah, even if you maybe didn't finish all your work at work, you'll go to the gym and then you'll come home and then you'll get your work
And you'll
done you
do
brought
your
from the
work.
office.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah, that's a really good point. It's a really good point.
So I think I'm always thinking long-term. I'm always trying to think very practically, like real life. Because a lot of what I've always heard, and you probably too, from like research and people that have these theories of, okay, but how do you make it real? Like, this is what's really happening for this family, for this child. Like, this is great. But like you asked, like, what about this? What about Facebook being pretty good sometimes, or video games, or parallel play, or watching stuff together?
Right. It's not so black and white.
No.
It's very nuanced.
Yes. Most things are. But big media and other things, it's easier to paint with a broad brush.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
But
Very sticky headlines. Yep.
right. So it's an annoying thing I say a lot when parents and kids ask me stuff, but I say, like, it depends. And then we
Yeah.
talk about the nuance on it depends on what. But then there are some things I'm like, this is a black and white issue for me. Like,
Yeah.
I don't, for example, like one thing I write about, like, I don't think a 10-year-old should sleep with their cell phone in the room all night. Like, I just, personal opinion based on what I've read, said, like, or when it comes to health stuff, like, yes, I do believe every child should get an hour of some kind of activity throughout the day. Walking, playing, swimming, whatever.
Yep. So you brushed on emotional dysregulation, having to, like, nothing gets through to someone unless they're in a state of calm.
Right.
But what would you say, since we're talking real situations here, are some best ways parents can help their children learn to manage the big emotions and frustrations?
I see it when I'm with the families real time, which is great. Also a little stressful at times. But one of the things, that's the kind of two-prong approach is teaching whoever is getting dysregulated to learn how to communicate that and to communicate it early on before we're to the point of crises, and to teach them also how and when to take space. And on the flip side of that, teaching the parent to know when to provide the space and not chase after, not look at it as a sign of disrespect. You're going to listen to me and sit here and take it because I'm the adult.
Mm-hmm.
I've never seen that work. And I've seen it in practice where, like, you have to listen as I'm screaming at you and sit there and take it and agree with me because I'm the adult and I'm right. And you can't lose your temper. That doesn't happen. So a lot of times I have to stop it and cut it off and be like, first of all, like, they've stopped listening to you now because they're completely dysregulated. They're upset. You're obviously upset and angry, whatever else. So this is where I'm going to say, we're going to stop for a minute. And then having them practice saying whatever the phrase is, or it could be a nonverbal. Funny, in the last 5 years, I've done a lot of inadvertently, like, couples counseling with teenagers and, like, college kids.
Okay.
So I've learned a lot, and they have to even, it's the same issue. It's
You've done couples. I'm registering what you're saying.
Oh
You've
my
done
God.
couples counseling with college kids and teenagers.
It's hilarious.
I love that.
It's great though. They're showing me, like, what do you think of this text? What should I write back? And, like, look at this and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, learn and teaching, like, a lot of communicating and regulating. Like, those, I say those words over and over and over, communicating the right way though, right? No name calling, not like the kind of like emotional blackmail or whatever else. And knowing when you're dysregulated and saying, like, I can't listen to you right now. I have to go. So I try to teach the parent too, your attention to your child is technically the reward. You're the reward. And if your child's screaming at you, they don't deserve the privilege of your attention. And on the flip side, it doesn't mean you don't love them. It doesn't mean whatever, like, you're not able to fully listen to them and respond to them because you're now getting upset. So it's okay for you to remove yourself.
Yeah.
But it's also in the framing, like, I'm not, like, I'm upset right now. Like, I love you, but I can't listen to you scream at me because I don't want to scream back at you. So I'm going to go.
Yeah. Obviously you can't just go when you have a 3-year-old, but I think of that too when my daughter, she doesn't know how to downregulate.
Right.
So when she has just lost it, there is nothing I can say or do except give her a hug and show her that she's loved. And until her emotions come down.
That's it.
And she's regulated.
And that's where the space is good. And I always have to remind the parents, and a lot of it in our generation, it seems to be increasing more and more. We don't like to see our child upset. But I always kind of frame it with that growth mindset idea, right? Of like, now your child's getting an opportunity to practice self-calming. And that's great. And then we can praise it. We can reward it. Be like, I know you got upset, but I loved that you got up and you didn't scream and you didn't break anything and you just went to your room. Like, I'm really proud of you. That's great. Because again, I'm thinking you're going to have roommates, you're going to have bosses, you're going to have boyfriends or girlfriends or spouses.
That's exactly where I was going in my
Right?
mind.
Like, you have to have this skill.
But I was also thinking on the flip side of like the person who doesn't have as big of emotions, right? And you're seeing your partner who does have big emotions get dysregulated. There's literally, again, nothing you can say in the moment. You need to give them space.
Yeah. And you're not, and I say this to the kids and the adults too, it's not your job to make them feel better. You know, you're not in charge of this person's emotions.
Yeah.
Now, don't go and make them upset for no reason.
Right. Don't be an asshole.
Right. Don't be an asshole. Right.
Yeah.
I say that a lot to like the teens I work with. I'm like, don't purposefully like do this, but you're not in charge. When they say like, well, mom will get mad, be like, that's not your job. Like, you don't, it's not about that. She's an adult. She'll deal with it.
Yeah.
And I say the same to the parents. You know, I'm like, wouldn't you rather your child learn how to regulate and know how to make themselves feel a little bit better versus you having to fix it? You know, you get stuck in the happiness trap where I have to then kind of teach like happiness is a feeling. It comes and goes just like sadness and anger and whatever. But being at peace is like something that lasts. That's forever. You want, you know, the baseline of your child's overall emotional well-being in a pretty good place. But there's going to be spikes and there's going to be other things, and that's fine. Let them learn how to, you know, work their way through it as long as it's not harmful. And I talk about that a little bit in the book of like looking for warning signs, like when do I step in?
Yeah.
And I try to make it kind of like black and white. So it's a little easier. It's easy when it comes to medicine, right? If you take your daughter's temperature and it's over 100, now I know something's up. She's going to need Tylenol, ibuprofen. Maybe we have to go to the doctor. But if it was 99, like, it's fine.
You're going to watch it.
Right. Where it's pretty similar with kids. Like, they've done enough research where they found, and you'll know your own child, like if something's off, if there are warning signs, if something's different, it's a red flag, like something's going on.
Yeah.
But again, not your job to fix it, but that's where the communication comes in.
Right. The good questioning. And I think that also would be really helpful to share with parents. What are examples of questions that truly engage your children, where they're not going to just say yes, no, right? Where you can get more from them and you can connect.
Yeah. It's always going to be harder for the parent. Like, so I'm raising right now, I have a teenage daughter and a tween-age son. So I get to practice all this stuff, you know, with my own little guinea pigs, which is great. And with the kids I work with. So you definitely want to create an environment where you let them talk about what they want, even if you're not interested in it, because it'll give them more of a space and more of the kind of habit of then eventually sharing the things that are maybe more important to you. So if they want to talk about Fortnite, you listen. If they want to show you their nighttime routine that they got off TikTok and want to go to Ulta and buy all these things, you don't just say, no, you do that with your mother. Like, I don't care. So that's the kind of preventative. That's like the setup, right? Like, the more you do that, the more they're apt to talk about these other things, because now they've built a habit of, oh, I can talk to this person about whatever. It's not just about like schoolwork.
Right. And I'm being heard and valued and cared for and trusted.
And then you always want to start, like, you don't have to start with the most severe, intense, private, whatever. You know, you gotta, they're still people. You know, you wouldn't go on a date and right away be like, so do you want to have kids? Like,
should we get a prenup or not?
Right. Like, this is a person. You start with like, you know, tell me about your day. And then you know, they teach us to teach others, like asking those open-ended questions. and ask them the stuff that's part of their routine. Like, who'd you sit with at lunch? And
Mm.
what was the worst part about the day? What was the best part about the day? Just kind of getting them to think in that way.
Instead of how was school today?
Right. Like you don't want the yes, no's. And then once they start going, it's kind of funny. You start to see, then they bring up something. Oh yeah, like I remember like the other day, this thing happened. I see it in my office all the time. And then the parent will look at me and be like, oh, I didn't know that. I'm like, oh yeah, yeah, look at that. Like this thing happened. Then they get
Yeah.
very happy. Like, oh, I wish you shared that with me more. And then like, well, you never ask, or you don't ask that way. You just said, how's school?
Right. Right. And I'm sure we've all fallen victim to that because, that's the easiest question that comes to our mind. But what's the best part of your day? What's the worst part of your day? And I think we can use that in any context with friends, with
Absolutely.
partners. Yeah.
I love the idea of all those new strategy games and fun cooperative games, like for the older,
the chat pack.
Right. Like
Yes.
The icebreakers, the conversation starters, the never have I ever's. It's just great practice for everyone to engage and actively listen and learn about each other instead of the focus being on, grades. I've had so many kids tell me like all my interactions with this parent is about my grades. And all my interactions with this parent is about is my room clean. And that's it. There is no
Yikes.
Right. Like there is no, oh, are you talking to any new, boys that you're interested in, or girls or whoever you're interested in? Or how's it going with like this friend group? Like you never mention them anymore.
Yeah. And I almost think about that from, again, I like to see patterns, my pattern recognition, ADHD, go figure. Same. But like as entrepreneurs, bosses, whatever, leaders, imagine if I said to an employer or someone who worked with me, you didn't get the thing done, or how's that thing coming? And that was the only thing I asked them. Or what process are you using to do that thing? But I never asked, how are you?
Yeah.
What's new?
Yeah. And then what kind of response and output do you think you're going to get?
Very shut down, defensive, minimal.
Yeah.
Probably not someone who's going to last very long if all you're focused on is their performance rather than who they are as a person.
Then what parents will say to be devil's advocate, they'll say, well, I have to prepare them for the real world. Their boss isn't going to do this, or they're whoever. And I say like, but you're not their boss. You're their parents. You're their care. Like they're already doing that in school, right? They have 7 or 8 bosses that they have to deal with every day. And when they go to college, they'll have more. You're not their boss. You want them to get ready for that environment, have them get a part-time job, like over the summer when they're a teenager or in college or something. Then they can learn that skill. What you're really doing is not just like you're raising your child to be independent, but you also have to create such a strong connection and relationship that they know that you guys are partners.
Yeah.
You're not just the warden. You're not the dictator and the manager and the ruler with the stick and just telling them, do it this, do your homework and blah, blah, blah. Like
it will work short term, like I know personally people very close to me who had that type of parenting, that militant, authoritative, and they were scared and they did it. But now, they're like the opposite, right? As a parent.
Right.
And it didn't give you long-term motivation, as you mentioned. And side note, it is such a fine line between codependency and parenting, like that, not a fine line, but there is this middle ground that I'm sure you talk more about of, what makes healthy relationships and parenting. Dr. Becky Goodside was talking about validating your child is incomplete parenting. Not to say it's bad parenting, it's incomplete. So we validate and then what, right? So it is a full-time job being a parent. It is exhausting. I know, right? I know firsthand, I know in working with people, I know. but there's just so much to it. And that's why what you do is so important in giving not only the children the skills, but also the parents.
And it's interesting because I work with a lot of people and have met a lot of people from different cultures, different countries. And here it's a little more isolated. It's not Brooke and the aunts and the grandmas and the neighbors are all raising their kids together.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot more isolated. So there's a lot more pressure. Not to mention, if you look at people working now compared to 70 years ago, financial pressure, everything else, it's hard.
Right.
It's
Right. The modern
difficult.
parents, I mean,
Yes.
my husband and I both are working
Yep.
full-time jobs as entrepreneurs.
Yep. And 70 years ago, 100 years ago, that wasn't the norm.
No.
So with every generation, even though like some things will improve and some things will get better, easier, but then there are more things that are challenging that make parenting harder. Kids tell me they wish they grew up in the 80s and 90s because they wish they didn't have social media. They could bike wherever they want and hang out at the mall. And they get it. And I'm like, yes, it was much easier.
I'm not going to lie. I was a child of the 80s.
Yeah.
And if there was I mean, I was bullied for the majority of my life, but if there was social media at that time, that would have probably destroyed me based on my maladaptive coping strategies.
Right.
Not getting the right tools that I needed. Now I do, but I can't imagine. So yes, teenagers and children these days have it extra hard with the constant visibility of everyone's life and the rejection and the fear of missing out and the false reality of what other people are doing, how other people are being successful. And it's really difficult for the neurodivergent population, especially to regulate that.
And like you said, the fine line in the gray area is there might be some things in that world that are helpful and useful and good for you, but there needs to be a balance. And I talk about that all the time, with anything. Like, yes, if you want some time to just scroll through whatever, but there also should be time during the day when you're engaging with the environment, with people. There should be time when you're sitting and relaxing, but there should also be time when you're physical and active.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm always, again, like I'm thinking this always is like one of the first articles I wrote about is like parenting, it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. Like if you think of it like your kid is going to be with you at least 18 years and a lot, maybe more, then that's how you have to think of it, that these are skills that this child's going to need in order to really survive on their own and to do the best that they can do. It might take longer for some. They might need more or less support. But if that's the goal and that's everyone's kind of, they're in sync with this is what we want to eventually happen, it makes it a little easier. When you have the kids screaming at Target or anything else, well, what's the goal here?
You're giving me some PTSD.
I'm sorry.
I think of Brielle like a year ago, just her whole like shake, she just throws it on the floor as soon as we get it to Target.
Yeah.
Could not walk into the store. Had no idea why she had the tantrum.
It's
at Target.
I saw a little girl having a tantrum at Target. And my
it's
daughter
probably my daughter.
No, it's different Target. But, the mom is very calm and the girl's like on the floor in Target where my first thought was like, oh, that floor's so dirty. And she's crying like, no, like screaming. The mom is just calm. I almost want to go up to the mom and be like, good for you, for not like grabbing her and ripping her out of the store. Screaming at her. Let her cry.
We need more of that.
You just let her cry. Once she started crying a little less, the mom just said, okay, I'm going to like start, checking out now. The girl just crying, following her because they're always going to follow you, survival. And by the time they walked out the door, the girl stopped crying. And she was probably like
amazing.
3. And it was, I know my daughter would not let me. She's at that age. Like, don't embarrass me. Don't talk to anyone. I'm like, no, that mom needs to hear. She's doing a great job. And
I love that.
It's wonderful that she didn't get upset. The little girl was upset. She understood probably like she's 3. Like, yeah, she got upset. She didn't get what she wanted. And I don't know if it's appropriate that we do that more and encourage each other and support each other and be like,
I love that.
right? Like,
We don't hear it enough, right? We
I
do
think,
need that validation,
yeah,
especially when we're
I
in the thick of
agree.
it.
Like I coached basketball last year, and I loved when the parents would show up and they wouldn't be on their phones and they'd be like really engaged in watching and asking if they could help. And I'm like, this is great. And, if we lost, it wasn't anything bad and it wasn't yelling at the
Anyone's
refs or whatever.
faults, right?
Right, right. It was like, let them be kids and let them learn. And if they get upset or this, that, whatever else, like this is a great place for them to get that practice.
Yeah, yeah. Lots of great nuggets, and I know that you and I can go on forever
Yeah.
here. But if you were to leave our audience with one, and this is the hardest question, and say, leave the audience with one thing that you think they need to hear before tuning out of this podcast, what would it be?
The one thing, if it's the adults we're talking to, it's to know that whatever you're feeling, totally valid when you're frustrated or upset, whatever else. But if we kind of think of ourselves as parents as also teachers and role models, it makes the job, if you want to call it that, of parenting easier and more pleasurable. Because when you think of it as a teacher, the kid's not going to get 100% on his first math test before you taught him any of the math. But over time, they're going to get better at it. And then you'll get to see the progress. So you won't judge yourself as the teacher on the first math test they got before you taught them anything. You'll judge yourself on, at the end of the term or the end of childhood, did I teach them everything they needed to learn? Can they function on their own? It's not as stressful, and you won't be as hard on yourself, because it's not about, they have to behave at the restaurant or they have to do this or their grades or that, whatever. If you shift the thinking to that, it makes it more enjoyable because, I guess you were a teacher too, right? Before you're administrator.
Mm-hmm.
It's such a wonderful feeling to see your child struggle and learn and grow and then finally make progress. I'm going to get emotional, really makes me think
see
as a
it. I
parent,
see
right?
it.
When you see it in your child, I have a child who has severe anxiety where it's been debilitating and we've had to go through some different paths. And
I'm
when you
sorry.
see them make those gains and apply it, and okay, I know I'm, as a parent, you feel these feelings of guilt and what am I doing wrong? And, is this my fault? But I'm going to stay the course and I'm going to really look at it from the perspective of, I'm not going to rescue. I'm going to help them develop these skills and learn how to deal with it so they can feel empowered. And when they do, it's the best feeling in the world. So that's what I would leave everyone with.
Thank you for sharing that.
It's my pleasure.
Your children are lucky to have you
as
a father who gets
that
it.
Is, and they know that is, and I don't know if it's partly my culture or religion when I was raised, that's a privilege. That's my privilege. But thank you for having me. I
absolutely
love doing this.
Well, I loved having you. So,
thank you.
David, where can people find you if they want to get your book? They want to find you.
I'm on Amazon. I'm on Barnes & Noble. If you just put in Raising Future Adults, it's the first one. I actually have a copy. Looks like this.
Woohoo!
That's my name. I'm all over online. It's funny. They tell us professionally, just make sure no one's stealing your stuff. Google search of your name. So LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat. Yeah, but Amazon, just Raising Future Adults. It's the first one that pops up.
Thank you, David.
Thank you, Brooke.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Successful with ADHD. I hope it helps you on your journey. And if you need any additional support for you or a loved one with ADHD, feel free to reach out to us at coachingwithbrooke.com and all social media platforms at Coaching with Brooke. And remember, it's Brooke with an E. Thanks again for listening. See you next time.